Hello historians, today we are going to start Unit 4 notes by looking at the growth of the West. This is Unit 4, Notes 1. You will need a highlighter and a pencil. You will also need 4 different colored pencils and your notes packet. Before we did our Civil War unit, we were looking in Unit 2 at the era of manifest destiny and all of the new territories and states that were forming out in the West. We talked about the California Gold Rush. We talked about wars with Mexico, and we talked about like the Indian Removal Act that was passed in 1830. So we're going to need to be thinking back to those topics as we do today's notes. Settlers had been gradually moving west into territories obtained during the era of manifest destiny. With the rise of the steam locomotive in the early 1860s, Congress and President Lincoln gave approval for federal funding to build a railroad that would span across the continent. This Transcontinental Railroad would unite the industrialized East with all the factories that we talked about forming out in the Northeast, with the natural resources that you could find out west, the mineral wealth, the lumber, all of that stuff that we talked about being natural resources that were utilized from those western territories. With the Pacific Railway Act in 1862, Congress gave funding to 2 companies to build the Transcontinental Railroad. The Union Pacific would link 2 existing railroad lines that were already built out in the Northeast. We talked about those when we were looking at some of the strengths and weaknesses of the North and the South during the Civil War. The North had more access to more miles of railway because they invested in building railroads between the northern cities. Southern states did not invest very much in building railroads because they used those wide navigable rivers, and their steam engines were on steamboats. So we had all kinds of cities like Chicago, and they were already linked up with railroad prior to the Civil War. Now, at the end of the Civil War, we have this plan to link those existing railroads and finish the job and head all the way to the Pacific Ocean. So the Union Pacific is going to build this span of track that heads west. Okay, the Central Pacific is going to start in Sacramento, California, and build east. Okay, Sacramento is where we had the gold rush. A lot of people had headed there using the California Trail, like we talked about in Unit 2. The government paid the railroad companies not in money, but in federal land, which then the railroad companies would divide up and sell off to settlers and businessmen, and that's how they made their money. So in order to remember which railroad is which, let's remember that Central Pacific starts with C. It begins in California, which also starts with C. Okay? Union Pacific, label that. Central Pacific on the map, you need to label that. And we've got a definition for Transcontinental Railroad. It's a railroad that crossed the continent and connected the economies of the East and West. On page 3 in your notes packet, you need to also highlight 3 context clues in my provided definition so that you have that in. The Union Pacific Company started in Nebraska, and they built tracks westward across the Great Plains and the Rocky Mountains. In 1866, the Union Pacific hired former Civil War General Grenville Dodge to take charge of the railroad construction. He had built railroads before the Civil War, and because he had this military experience of being a general, he was skilled in leading a lot of men at a time. So he was able to command a force of over 10,000 workers on the railroad, most of whom were immigrants. The majority of those immigrants were Irish. Many Irish immigrants had come over in the 1840s because of an event in Ireland that was tragic called the Irish potato famine, where the potato crops were, for a couple years in a row, were infested with a kind of bug, a pest that ruined their crops year after year. And so people were beginning to get very hungry and starving. And so many Irish fled Ireland during that time because there wasn't enough food. So the Irish immigrants who had been here for about a generation were looking for different types of jobs, and many of Irish men wanted to work for the railroad. There were also other immigrants that took those jobs, but another huge group, two more huge groups that were mainly hired by the Union Pacific to build the railroad are former Civil War soldiers that had fought for both the North and the South, and a lot of the many freed slaves who didn't want to go back into that whole system of sharecropping that we talked about. This provided them other opportunities. So let's fill in this information on page 3 in our notes packet. The railroad company hired by the Congress to build railroad tracks from Nebraska west across the Great Plains and Rocky Mountains, that's the Union Pacific. And then Grenville Dodge was hired to lead the construction of the Union Pacific Railroad. He hired former Civil War soldiers, many Irish immigrants, and some former slaves. The Central Pacific was tasked with building track over and through the Sierra Nevada mountains. This is the same mountain range that we talked about in Unit 2 with the Donner Party. So that's when they got stuck and there a massive blizzard, snowstorm, and they basically died and ended up having, in order to keep from starving to death, eating their family members who had died. So that was something we had talked about, and it was pretty tragic. With the installation of this, the building of this railroad, that danger through the Sierra Nevada mountains is completely taken away. But we had to blow through the mountains in order to lay down this track. And so Charles Crocker, who was the head of construction for the Central Pacific Railroad, decided to hire 50 Chinese workers. Some partly because they were very skilled with using dynamite and explosives. Dynamite and and gunpowder and that kind of stuff was invented in China hundreds of years before. And the other reason was that some of the white workers were not super reliable. Many of them, if they heard wind of a gold or silver discovery nearby, they would flee. They would just leave the job site and go off to try to strike it rich, looking for gold or silver. So Charles Crocker got a little tired of that, and when those 50 Chinese workers proved to be hardworking and very skilled for the task, he sent recruiters over to China to bring back more workers. The Central Pacific Railroad Company ended up employing more than 12,000 Chinese who cleared the trees, shoveled dirt, blasted tunnels, and laid thousands of miles of tracks. So when we were talking about the Central Pacific Railroad, Central Pacific starts with C. California, where it begins, starts with C. Charles Crocker starts with C for both parts of his name, and Chinese workers start with C. So that makes it a lot easier for us to remember. On May 10th, 1869, the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific Railroads met together in Utah Territory at a point called Promontory Summit. A golden spike was driven in to complete the nearly 2,000 miles of track for the Transcontinental Railroad. Ultimately, the railroad would expand and add more and more lines across the continent. New settlers would flood into the west and establish towns and cities. So please label Promontory, Utah on that map and add information for the Union Pacific and Central Pacific lines meeting at Promontory, Utah on page 4. Okay. The railroad needed a way to regulate time because the railroads prior to these railroads, each community set time based on the position of the sun. When the sun was directly overhead, it was noon. But it's not noon or the sun directly overhead in the entire country at the same time. Okay, we have a really big country. So railroads needed to be able to schedule the departure and arrival of trains. And to solve this and make sure that everybody was telling time the same way, the railroad companies set up standard time and divided the U.S. into 4 time zones. So we're going to shade in. I told you needed 4 different colored pencils. I want you to shade in each of these and label here at the top each of these 4 time zones. Okay, we have the Eastern time zone, which is an hour ahead of us here in Minnesota. Okay, we are in the Central Standard Time Zone. So if it's noon here, it's going to be 1 o'clock. It's going to be 1 hour later in the Eastern Time Zone. Okay, in the Mountain Time Zone, it's 1 hour earlier, and in the Pacific Time Zone, it's 2 hours earlier than us. Okay, so make sure you shade those in and label them. On page 2 in the packet, you have the Unit 4 timeline. Would you please write this event for 1869, the Transcontinental Railroad is completed. Okay. The same year that Congress approved the Transcontinental Railroad, they also passed the Homestead Act. This new law offering farm families 160 acres for federal land out west, this really brought in many, many new people to settle the West. All they had to do was establish a working homestead. They had to pay a $10 registration fee for the paperwork, but then they had to clear the land, build a home, and farm the land for 5 years. And then that 160 acres was basically theirs for that $10 filing fee, and that's it. The Homestead Act drew settlers west and attracted foreign immigrants with the promise of land ownership. By 1910, the number of farms in the U.S. had tripled to more than 6 million. So fill in for homesteaders on page 4, that information. Okay, same year that Congress, I already read this, sorry. Make sure that on page 3, you highlight 3 context clues for the definition of the Homestead Act. Some new settlers to the west dreamed of striking it rich. In the 1870s, another rush took place when gold and silver were found in many states and territories throughout the West. Boom towns sprung up almost overnight, and most turned into ghost towns then when the easy-to-find gold and silver was gone. The boom towns had no government or law enforcement. Robbery and murder were common, and miners had their own methods of vigilante justice to control crime. They called it the Wild West for a reason. Another group of settlers was made up of cowboys and ranchers. Millions of longhorn cattle roamed the Texas plains. Cities out east provided a profitable market for beef, so people out east wanted to eat beef. The cow towns then appeared along the railroad lines. So you see that there are cattle drive trails that go north, and then each of these cities along the railroad lines become a cow town where cattle were herded there and put into cattle cars on the railroad and shipped to the meat processing area in Chicago. They have Chicago becomes known as the meat packing industry, basically headquarters. You can see this is famous African-American cowboy Nat Love. Actually, many African-Americans and Hispanic Americans found work as cowboys. They really enjoyed that for a good portion of about 20 years. There was a big ranching boom. As railroads moved into the West, buffalo hunters followed. Hunters killed huge numbers of the North American bison for their hides and their bones. You can see that whole stack of bison skulls in that photograph down there. The Plains Indians depended on those bison, though, for food, and they were horrified by the slaughter. By 1880, the buffalo had all but vanished, and almost basically extinct. And the Plains Indians were left with very little choice but to go and live on reservations. Their land was in high demand for cattle ranching, mining, and homesteading. Originally, the Indian Removal Act of 1830 that we talked about back in Unit 2 had given much of the land west of the Mississippi River to the American Indians. As the railroads brought settlers, homesteaders, ranchers, and miners out west, the Plains Indians watched their land get snatched up once again. So you can watch this map and see how the American Indian land is just decreasing slowly but surely. And this is what it's like today. Okay. The U.S. Plains Indians hated the idea of living on these reservations, and many tribes resisted. It went against their entire way of life, especially those Plains Indians that were nomadic tribes and followed their food source around. So being stationed in one place and not being able to move was a whole lifestyle shift for them. The U.S. Army was sent in to force the Indians onto reservations, and a number of battles took place between American Indians and the U.S. military. The federal government, you learned about this in 6th grade, the federal government promised those annuity payments to Indians in exchange for their reservations per the treaties that they had signed. Often the promised food and money for those allotments or those annuity payments didn't arrive on time, or they were late, or they never arrived, or they did arrive, but the federal agents that were hired by the government to be in charge of distributing the payments were sometimes dishonest, and they would keep the food and the money and turn out and sell it to white settlers and make a profit, which was pretty diabolically evil. The most famous battle between the Plains Indians and the U.S. military took place in present-day Montana. Near the Battle of Little Bighorn, this is where George Custer leads a group of American soldiers to attack the Dakota and the Cheyenne. They didn't plan this out. It was supposed to be a surprise attack, but it did not go well for George Custer and the U.S. military. George Custer and every single U.S. soldier died. This battle became nicknamed Custer's Last Stand. So fill in George Custer and